you are into movie-related discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am The Wiz, and I'm here today with...
Kim Shactman.
You're actually here.
I'm back.
Oh my God.
I'm back.
You actually came back.
I came back from Arizona.
How was Arizona?
It was fantastic.
Oh, wow. Good.
Yeah, it was hot, but it was beautiful. We stayed at the Biltmore Resort, which is pretty hoity-toity, so
wow.
It was an experience.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, was it like a dry heat there, or was it really
Yeah,
humid?
it was 110 degrees.
Yeah.
But we jumped in the pool, and the pool was 80. And it still felt kind of cool in there, so that was good.
Yeah, it reminds me of Texas. Texas, when it was around this time, would be like 109, 110, 111 every day in the summer. And on the one hand, it was like brutal. But on the other hand, I'm not really sweating so much.
Yeah, it wasn't terrible. It's just kind of like, I still need to get in the air conditioning here and there. So
yeah. All right, so we're here to review the 1982 comedy Tootsie, starring Dustin Hoffman, Jessica Lange, Teri Garr, and Dabney Coleman. Directed by Sydney Pollack. Before we decide to watch this movie, Kim, what did you know about Tootsie?
So I only knew the base premise of the story, and obviously this was my pick this week. And the reason I picked this film is because I'm actually going to go see the play for the first time this fall.
Oh, okay.
So I wanted to kind of see how the movie compares to the play, and I was like, well, if I'm going in the next month or two to see the play, I might as well check out the movie.
I've been interested in this movie for a while. I actually really like Dustin Hoffman.
I love him. He's good.
He's a very good actor, And I have seen so much praise of this movie, of his performance, of how the funny the movie is, and other things like that. I mean, it's been on the AFI Top 100 list of comedies, and I think it's also in the main list of best movies from America. It's been in other Top 100 lists of all time. It's a celebrated movie. I've always been interested in seeing this movie. I wanted to check it out, and I think in this time, too, it would be an interesting movie to watch, bearing in mind what's going on with gender identity and stuff like that. So I thought this would be a very interesting movie to check out. Why don't we get into it? Why don't we talk about the movie Tootsie, the 1982 comedy, directed by Sydney Pollack. I think the one thing I could say about this movie is it's cute.
It is very cute. I did love the overall story. It was cute. I know it's kind of labeled as a comedy. I wasn't laughing out loud, I can tell you that. It was fine. It was cute for what it was, but I didn't feel like it was hilarious or anything, you know?
I think the comedy parts are very inside baseball, and what I mean by that is you would have to be very familiar with how the world of which Tootsie is works in order to get the comedy aspects of it. Right. The film is about an unsuccessful actor played by Dustin Hoffman, and his inability to get parts, and his idea is to dress as a woman and pretend to be a woman to get a part in a trashy soap opera. And
keep in mind, too, the reason he couldn't get parts as himself is because, basically, to put it frankly, he was always pissing off the directors.
Oh, he was an asshole. They all know he was. The premise is they all know he's talented, but he's so unbearable to work with,
right? That
no one wants to.
They basically shunned him, in the whole city and in Hollywood too. They mentioned in the film.
Yes,
they're he's trying out. He lives in New York and he's trying out in New York City. Yeah, so it's almost like he switches his identity just so he can land a part,
right,
or a job because he's unemployed.
And there's that aspect of comedy in that movie too, that I think the more inside baseball stuff is I think a little more interesting and a little more funny, because if you get what's going on, you're like, there's also the hidden joke of, oh, Dustin Hoffman's insufferable. Okay, that's interesting. There have been rumors that he's actually kind of hard to deal with on set, so it's kind of
really?
Yes, yeah. I mean, he's a method actor. Do you know what that is?
I don't.
Okay, so method acting is when an actor, in order to actually perform the role, actually tries to mimic what happens to the character in real life. An example of that is, I don't know if you know the movie Marathon Man.
I've heard of it, I haven't seen it.
So Dustin Hoffman plays a character who goes through an exhaustion period. He does not sleep. He is in bad shape. A method actor, like he did in this movie, decides, okay, in order for me to inhabit the role efficiently enough, I can't sleep for 7 days.
So he becomes the role, basically.
Bingo. Yes, right.
Okay. That's called a method actor. Okay.
That's a method actor.
Learn something new every day.
That's also like Christian Bale, who, in order to inhabit a role, let's say in The Machinist, he loses 110 pounds and becomes gaunt. Like, that's...
So I can kind of see how he would be a little bit insufferable, because he's becoming that person, and when you're acting and you're a director, I'm sure it's hard to kind of direct somebody that, like, thinks that they don't need as much direction because they really have prepped for that role.
No, but that's common with most actors, period, because if they have to inhabit the role and become the character, oftentimes, and if it's a really good actor, oftentimes they'll go to the director or the writer and go, you know, I'm in this character right now, and I don't think this character would do this.
Right.
So
kind of challenging the director a little bit. Yeah.
Right. That kind of inside baseball stuff I thought was kind of funny in that aspect. But that's a very minor detail in the movie. Whereas the main thing about this film is the fact that the main character is identifying himself as a woman. Okay, let me rephrase that, because I know somebody will get a little upset by that mischaracterization. He's not identifying himself as a woman. He is disguising himself as a woman in order to actually get the part. I think what's funny about the movie is that the praise that it's got is that it shows a man identifying the problems that women have in the workplace. And I would guess at 82, that was a very eye-opening experience.
Yes.
By this point, it's kind of old hat.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. Like, we know and we understand more, and we've learned and we've grown over the years.
Right. The message of this movie is not nearly as profound as I would say in, like, 82.
Right.
So then that leaves the comedy and the other aspects of the movie, which I think are at best. I think the comedy is decent, but I didn't really laugh out loud. I wasn't like guffawing. I wasn't.
As I mentioned, yeah.
Yes. It's not that it's bad. It's just like, that's kind of funny. You know?
Yeah. And, you know, I think Bill Murray adds his little... a tiny bit of comedic twist on it, you know, as he usually does. Yeah, I think comedic flair.
I think Bill Murray is actually the best part of this movie at times.
Yeah,
I think he is. Like, and he's the only character who knows exactly is going on and points out, you need therapy, dude.
Yeah. Like, just his little one-liners that are just excellent in this film.
This movie gets an inordinate amount of praise of being like, oh, it's eye-opening, it's important. At this point, I'm like, not really. Not anymore. Maybe in 82. Maybe
and
around
the Wiz and I were, you know, we were talking before we, you know, started taping this episode. We mentioned, and Wiz mentioned in it, and that stuck with me too, is kind of shifting into directing. Like, the director's films, and I'm not super familiar with his films, but some of them I am. They're good when they're first released in the moment, and you're like, oh, that was, you know, a pretty good film, not too bad, but they don't have any staying power with you, right? No. Like, so like maybe like 3, 4, 5 years down the road, they kind of become forgettable.
Yes, forgettable might be one way to put them. I would say they're curiosities. I would say that they would be a window into what films around that time would be like. So Tootsie is a great example of that. This is a movie that a lot of people would be like, oh, you know, that was funny and interesting and thoughtful for its time.
Right.
Like, now I would look at this as like, oh, that's a cute movie. If I saw this like much earlier and I went back in time or whatever, or didn't know what I know now, I think this would actually have been a really good movie. But now I think it's a cute comedy with, I think, some major problems, and the message that it's trying to convey to today doesn't work. But I would say probably from back then, I would guess it might have at that point. So there's two ways of thinking about this. So if we're thinking about this for today, I don't think it works very well. But if we're looking at it as a window of the past, I also think it kind of doesn't work because it just deals with the surface level issues
Yes.
of what it's talking about here. So we're going to do light spoilers throughout the review. We'll try not to spoil too much, but we won't have a spoiler section in
But there's not much to spoil. So.
No, and I think
hence
that's
the light spoilers.
And I think that's also kind of a disappointment too, and why I think this film has been overpraised over the years. Because if you really take the basics of it out, it's a very standard comedy.
Yes.
And I think if it wasn't for the fact that you had these really good actors in this, I think this would have been an utterly forgettable film. But because,
a very big flop, I think, if the actors weren't in it. I personally think.
Yeah, so let's get into what the basic thrust of the film is. So Michael Dorsey, which is Hoffman's character, he is an unsuccessful actor. He is now at a point where he's not going to get any roles.
Right.
So he does this last-ditch effort to disguise himself as a woman to get a part in a trashy soap. Story then becomes a cross between Michael realizing how men treat women and then a weird romance plot.
Yeah.
He
That's how I felt. I was like, wait a second.
Yeah, so has a girlfriend played by Teri Garr, who is absolutely adorable and absolutely
That's
lovely.
Sandy, correct?
Yes, that's Sandy. Okay. Absolutely lovely and adorable.
But she's not his girlfriend at the beginning. They're like lifelong friends almost, like 6 years worth of friendship.
I guess.
And then I feel that's how I read the film, like the story. And then he's trying to hide the fact that he's disguising himself as a woman from everyone except his roommate.
Yeah.
And he gets curious about one of her dresses.
Yeah.
And he's in her apartment and he goes to try it on. And she comes out of the shower and he's pretty much almost naked. So then he feels like obligated to have sex with her.
Yeah.
So, and then that's how like their actual relationship starts from a like romantic sexual aspect. And I just thought that was kind of weird. I just don't really know how I felt about how they went with that. Like it just seemed like poor Sandy. Like he's like almost like trying to have a relationship with her just to kind of like hide the fact that he's disguising himself. But then he's not putting any effort into it after the fact because he's got so much other things going on with this disguise and this other woman he's working with. So it's like, I just feel really bad for Sandy.
Yeah. So I think this is really how movies worked in like the 80s and 90s, where the main character is where the emotional center is of the movie, and they kind of forget about the other characters as long as it hits the what they want for the movie itself. So yes, it's funny
Which is fine. You know, like I get why they did it. The way it made me feel, I just felt bad for her.
No, yeah, absolutely. And some would also defend this, and I would look at that and say, if you like the movie, you probably defend this part by saying he's doing exactly what the director is doing to Julie. It's like a comparison thing where Michael is just as bad and he's not recognizing it. Right.
But like even though he's disguising himself as a woman, he's still a man.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. How do you like the message of, best actress in the world, a guy?
It's like, oh wow, and they kind of like point that out in the film a couple times too.
These women just can't handle it. It's like, oh God.
Well, yeah, he's like, I feel really bad if she found out that I took her part, because because again, keep in mind the part that he tries to play, like he goes to audition for a soap opera, is the same part that sounds like his really old friend Sandy was auditioning for, and she didn't get it because she lost it to Tootsie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sorry for the a little bit heavier spoilers, but it's like, poor girl.
Yeah. These spoilers are like in the first 15-20 minutes of the film, so that's fine. Look, the whole premise of the film is that he gets the part, so
right.
I think the weirdest part of this movie is the romance between Julie, who's played by Jessica Lange, in her Oscar-winning role, and with Michael disguised as Dorothy. I just was like, how are you going to do?
But you know what it is for me? It's like, it's the romance. Like, how do you make that actually work coming to the end of the film when she hasn't even really known him as a man, at all. But then also They're like twisting all this extra shit in there with like her dad.
Yeah. The comedy is basically, isn't it funny that he's dressed as a woman?
Right.
And the comedy also is like, can you not believe that these characters don't recognize that's a man under the mask? And there has been so much praise where people are like, I forgot that was Dustin Hoffman as a woman. I completely forgot. Such a great performance.
He did really well.
He did. Okay. He
as a woman.
Okay. He did. However, was there any point in time where you're watching this and going, oh, I forgot that's Dustin Hoffman? I did not. I was like, that's clearly Dustin Hoffman.
No, but I did keep reminding myself that like he was playing like an older woman. Mm-hmm. And I think he pulled that off very well. Like I was like, yes, this is like what an older woman in the 80s would sound, act, and look like.
I get that, but what I'm saying is, and this
like, I mean, I knew, I never once thought that, but I was teetering on the edge of not recognizing him at a couple points because I thought he was so good.
Yeah, I mean, there's some gender-bent performances where you can forget as you go along in the movie, go, oh, wait, this is someone from the opposite sex. Oh my God, I completely forgot. This ain't one of them. This was supposed to be part of the comedy, where he is clearly a man, and it is obvious that he is. Everybody else in the movie just doesn't seem to recognize it for whatever reason. Maybe I am more attuned to this. I really don't think I am. I think I'm pretty bad with this stuff, to be completely honest with you. But as I was watching this film, it's like, I don't see how anybody couldn't tell that this was a man in a woman's disguise. And like I always think of like when it comes to men disguising themselves as a woman in film, the first film that comes to my mind that I absolutely love is Mrs. Doubtfire. Right. I thought that had a lot more comedy in it. Hopefully people wouldn't forget that that's Robin Williams because it's pretty obvious. You know what I mean? Like right. But he still did a fantastic job disguising himself, and I think that's the same case in this film. I agree, but that was part of the comedy. Like, that was part of the movie. Like, it is very obvious that it is him. But I think he did a better job in Mrs. Doubtfire. Maybe it was the writing, maybe it was the directing. I don't know. But I think he did a better job at showing that he is disguising himself, like hiking up his stockings on the bus and like being uncomfortable in a wig and in a bra. And like, I feel like maybe the writing in this film, like it didn't show that as much. Like a couple times it shows him like tripping on his heels and then maybe like fixing his butt or like pulling a wedgie. But like, I feel like they could have done a better job with that because I feel like the minute he like put on all the clothes and just like walked out of his apartment, it was like supernatural to him. I think it was to show how much of a good actor that Michael was. And Michael Dorsey. And it was a way supposed to make you feel bad that, oh, he's clearly so talented. How could he not get a job? That's true. But they say in the film, he's an asshole. That's why he didn't get a job. Right. So it's kind of hard to feel bad for him when it's clearly his fault. I would say I agree with you. I like Mrs. Doubtfire a lot more, and I think that film does it better with the comedy. At no point was I watching this movie and believing any of the romance between Jessica Lange's character, Julie, and Dustin Hoffman as Dorothy. Or I would say Dustin Hoffman as Michael as Dorothy. Like, I did not believe the romance at all. And well, then they start to like almost focus more. They shift a focus with the romance part on Julie's character and how she's being kind of taken advantage of by her director, but she's playing it off as she doesn't care. And then, she's a single mother and her dad's single too. Cause sounds like, I mean, I don't know for sure, but it sounds like they lost their mother, her mother, whatever. And it's kind of like, okay, whose story is this? It's a lot of added detail that I think obfuscates the main plot. I think they forgot the entire plot of Michael disguising as Dorothy and the whole gender dynamics and the bent and the comedy from there. And they go through this whole entire thing in regards to Julie and her father and everything. And then they try to twist it into the romantic portion of him trying to get out of disguise. Like, he's like, but I love her, but she thinks I'm a lesbian. And then, Sandy thinks I'm gay, or the roommate thinks I'm gay or something. I don't know. And it's just like, this is getting too confusing. And none of that stuff that's in there has enough depth to actually really sink your teeth into. Again, like, I would look at this and say, I would say for the 80s, this would probably have been a mind-blowing, like a very thoughtful one. But at this point, where this happened more recently, but transgenderism is much more accepted. Gays and lesbians are like, okay, who cares? Whatever. Whatever floats your boat, have fun. As long as you're not hurting anybody, I really do not care. I would say in the 80s, this would have been like, oh my God, how progressive. Now it's kind of like, this movie's kind of a mess. It's like, I don't see why this movie gets as much praise as it does. This is very much this was from the 80s, and it's 2023. I hate to say that we're more enlightened now, because there's so many other problems that we have, but in this sense, it's kind of quaint in a weird way, where I think the movie was trying to be much more of something else. At this point, it just doesn't hit the mark very well on that end. Let's get into performances. You know, as much as I like Dustin Hoffman in this movie, I liked him more as the actor than I liked him as Tootsie.
Really? I felt the opposite. In
regards to the comedy aspects, I think him as the actor was a little bit better than him as Tootsie. He performs as Tootsie, or as Dorothy, I should say, very well. The comedy aspect of him being a woman, I think, kind of falls flat as the movie goes.
I agree with that.
And I think it's because he plays it a little too seriously.
Well, I was going to say, like, if comedy was the dynamic they were going for, or the feel of the film, then no, I don't think he nailed that on the head as Dorothy. But if they were going for serious in a good disguise, I would say he did well as Tootsie.
I don't even think the disguise is that good.
I thought it was good. Again, and I'm thinking as in, like, if I was watching this in the 80s. Like, I thought it was a good disguise for the 80s. Like, nowadays, if somebody walked in with, you know, his appearance, his demeanor, his tone of voice as a woman, I'd be like, this is total bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, but I'm trying to think as in, like, if I was a woman in the 80s, like, I feel like that's what an older woman in the 80s would look like and talk like and act like and dress like. I personally think he nailed that, but from a comedic standpoint, no.
So you're offering the grace of this is set in the 80s.
Yes.
Are you saying that because it's how they dress in the 80s, or because they clearly didn't have the capability of making him look better because it was in the 80s?
No, I think they dressed in their hairstyles and the big glasses. Yeah, like, I think they nailed that portion of it. And I think the way he acted as an older woman in the 80s, that's exactly how I would picture an older woman in the 80s acting. Like, I think of my mother, right? Like, she had me in the 80s. She was a little bit older, and she had, like, the same hair. She had the same kind of a little bit of a sweeter demeanor when she was talking to people that she liked, but she could also be strong and forceful. Like, I feel like that's like an average woman would be at that age in the 80s.
That I understand, that I get, and I'm with you there. My issue is that anytime I see Dorothy, I see Dustin Hoffman. I do not see...
I don't know. I didn't feel that way.
Okay. So then, okay, that's fine. I mean, we have a difference of opinion there.
We agree to disagree. Yeah. I just didn't. The thing I noticed, and I don't know if this is the writing or the acting, so I'm totally open for you to enlighten me on this, but at the beginning of the film, when he was Michael Dorsey, like, and hadn't even thought about becoming Tootsie yet, I feel like when he was saying his lines, he was talking really fast and, like, kind of clippy. Like, I didn't feel like it came naturally, like, his lines. Whereas with Bill Murray, like, it was just, like, super smooth, and, like, I was like, wow, it doesn't even feel like he is acting.
It could be the character, but also... Maybe. But, like, Bill Murray is always like that. Bill Murray is...
like, that's, like, his character in, like, every film.
Yeah, that's him, essentially. Like, very... I don't know about to the point, but dry and very... like that. I don't mind the fact that he was quippy and fast in the movie, because I think that was the point of the character, that he is like that. Maybe. So when he transforms into Dorothy, again, shows how much of a good actor he is, because he can change that up to a certain extent. But I wasn't too bothered by that, I would say.
Like, I just felt like it was kind of, like, choppy. Like, the lines, like, at the beginning. Like, as time went on, it seemed to get better, but I don't... even with the Michael Dorsey character. But at the very beginning, I was kind of like, eh.
It could be a play of him displaying that character as aggressive, and as he becomes identifying as a or I gotta stop saying identifying as a woman. When he
disguises himself.
Yes, as he disguises himself as a woman, he inhabits that character. He softens, he slows down, he gets more sensitive.
So maybe that is like they did that on purpose.
Possibly. Yeah. I'm assuming that at least. The other performance, like I don't like Jessica Lange in this movie. I think she is one, wrong for the role, and two, I think also, like again, the romance angle. I think she doesn't perform it believably.
Honestly, I feel like in this movie she was like just a pretty face.
She won the Oscar for this role.
She did?
Yes. She was the only one that won an Oscar. Her, Hoffman, and Teri Garr got nominated, but she won the Oscar for Best Actress that year.
I thought Sandy was pretty good, Teri Garr. I didn't think she was too bad.
I think she was the best thing about this movie. I think she was.
Well, hold on a second. At the beginning of this review, you said Bill Murray was the best thing about this movie.
I think he was the funniest. I think he was the funniest.
He was the funniest. Yes,
he was the funniest about this. But I think Teri Garr. I think if we're going to performances, I think hers was the best.
Yeah, I agree.
Utterly likable and just charming and sweet. And whenever she's in the scene, I thought she was really good in this role. But she's underutilized in this movie. She's
I will agree with you on that for sure.
Yeah. Kind of got into writing. Directing is fine. Like it's just like it's a standard comedy with the way it's directed. I would say that probably the reason why he got nominated for an Oscar for director is just the flow of the film, where it's strange. Like this should be a subversive comedy, but it doesn't feel that way at all. Like even like Some Like It Hot, which I think you would say of this type of film, Mrs. Doubtfire would probably be a better movie. I think the best one would be Some Like It Hot.
I haven't seen that yet.
Oh God, it's so good. Like Some Like It Hot, even though it's from like the 50s and it's in black and white, is subversive. And it's still subversive to this day. Mm-hmm. I would also say to a certain extent, Mrs. Doubtfire is kind of subversive.
Yeah.
This film feels too safe. It feels a little too rosy for the topics and the things that it's talking about and the things that it's showing.
Right.
Like, it feels a little too neat. It feels a little too clean, I would say. These are very dynamic things to talk about that have a lot of charged emotions behind it. And it just feels like there's a nice, shiny veneer that feels inauthentic. I
agree with you 110%.
And with the type of talent that's in this movie, with a better script and with a lot more chances taken, would have been really interesting to see. But they just don't do that. They just go for I really think they just go for the safe play in this. Right. But again, this is from '82, so I don't think they could have gone that far. But just if you want to give it the excuse of it's a snapshot of the times, fine. I can understand that to a certain extent. But I also have to say, it's a snapshot of the times, but even for those times, plays it really safe. Like, oh, men and women are so different. Like, okay, great. Yeah, I know that. Thank you. Whatever. But, like, I think in that aspect, it kind of plays it a little too safe on that end. And the comedy is played a little too safe, too. Like, I
thought the comedy was played very safe. I wasn't.
Yeah, like I wasn't expecting it to be dirty or to be really eye-opening, but I would have thought it would have been a little more intelligent, but it just really wasn't. It was kind of like, okay, you're playing the safe roles in here, but okay, fine.
I don't really love the way the movie ended. I feel like they drew out the movie at certain points, like towards like middle to end of the film, that didn't need to be drawn out, and then they just like cut the end so short with what it was. I
think the whole subplot line with Julie's father was pointless. I don't think it was like it's more the comedy of a guy is not aware that he's into a man. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, like
sure, okay, yeah, ha ha ha.
I mean, I do kind of like though at the end when they kind of like they didn't kiss or anything, so you don't really pinpoint if they ended up together or if they just stayed friends. So that was fine.
Well, but the main character wanted to be romantically involved with her,
right? But she doesn't really depict that at the end if she wants to reciprocate that.
No, that's fine. I think that's fine. But
I liked that. Like, I thought that was fine.
Yeah, that's fine. I like that too. I just think with the message of the film, it would have worked better if Michael wanted to be friends with her, than romantic with her.
Yeah.
If it was,
because that doesn't work. Like,
yeah,
what?
Because it just makes him seem
I would
more.
like to learn to know more about you as a man now that you've come out as a man.
Yeah.
Out of disguise as a man. You know what I mean? Like, instead of just being like, yeah, I'm just gonna love you because I liked you as a friend as a woman. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Like, it makes Michael seem much more predatory than it really is.
Yeah, like kind of creepy.
I thought that the point of the film was he understands in a much deeper way what a woman goes through and how hard Julie's life is, and he wants to be that friend for her. I think that would have been a better way to actually end that part. Instead, he's like, I'm in love with you. I'm like, okay. It's like, did you not learn how other men kind of predatorize women in that way? Did you not learn that? Like,
right.
Really? But again, we might be ascribing a little more depth than is actually from that time. So I agree with it. I think the ending was kind of a miss. I think that the film did kind of drag a little bit. Honestly, if I'm being 100% honest, I think the whole Julie subplot could have been done away with. If I'm being absolutely honest,
yes. I think that's exactly how I felt.
All right, so you want to get into our final thoughts?
Let's do it.
All right, go right ahead. What are your final thoughts on Tootsie?
So I give Tootsie a 2.5 stars out of 5.
Okay.
Maybe for its time, it was a really great film. It just fell flat with me. There wasn't enough comedy in the film to make me kind of fall in love with it. I really hated the romance part, or lack thereof, I guess. How it would fit in the film with the storyline, and I feel like it didn't. Like, I feel like they were trying to make something fit that didn't. I did not love the ending of the film. I felt the film dragged out too long. On positive notes, I did enjoy Dustin Hoffman as Tootsie. I thought he pulled it off well, but more, again, on a serious note than a comedic note. So I find it hard to really, really label this film as a strong comedy. Bill Murray was excellent, as always. And Teri Garr, this is the first time I've seen her in a film, and I thought she was wonderful. Did not like Julie's character or really much about Julie. And I feel like they tried to focus too much on her. I mean, overall, it was fine. It was cute. Would I watch it again? No. And I am curious to see the play, though. I'm wondering how they're going to pull off the play for this when I go to see it in the fall at my local theater, because it's a long film. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if they're going to cut parts, or if there's like a twist on it. I don't really know. So I'll have to report back. But overall, I give it a 2.5 stars out of 5.
I'm going to agree with you on almost all your points and the rating. I'm giving it 2.5 as well. I was not bored throughout the film. I wasn't having a bad time. I thought it was fine. I thought it was entertaining as it is. I do share a lot of your sentiments, except for the fact that you liked Hoffman as Dorothy. Mm-hmm. I'm saying Dorothy because Tootsie was actually which is another
it was
thing.
A nickname from the director that Dorothy and Michael hated. Yes,
right. And for that to be the name of the film is also like, okay,
it's kind of weird that they did that.
Sure, okay,
maybe because it's just a cute name, so that they just slapped it on the film because it would stick with people, and I don't know, it would be memorable.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
I like Dustin Hoffman as the struggling actor more than I liked him as Dorothy, but I will say that Dorothy's is much more dramatic than it is comedic, but I think that's also why it suffers, because the drama involved in it, I think, just does not really work in this.
It's not, like, deep enough, too. Like, I feel like, like you said, it has that veneer over it. I think that was a good point.
Anything with Julie's character, from Jessica Lange's performance to the whole subplot, I think could have been cut. I think it was not well realized at all. I think Teri Garr is underutilized. I think she's the best part of this film. Bill Murray is funny in this movie. I hate reviewing films based on other people's opinions. I tried not to do this. But in this case, I have to say that either the people who have praised this give a lot of grace to the fact that this is a film from the early 80s and don't really put into perspective exactly what the story is. I think they offer it a ton more grace than they do in other films. I would say on some aspects of the film, it really doesn't drive the point it's trying to give as it says it does. Like, the whole point of the film, I think, was for a man to identify with the struggles of a woman. But then, at every step and turn, he's manipulating all these women, and he's also undercutting them for his role, and also manipulating them for his own gain and wants. So I'm like,
right, and then at the very, very end of the film, he's like, well, I kind of get it. And it's like, then why were you being such a douche to them the whole way through?
Yeah.
Even after you realized it, like, why were you still being kind of a douchebag?
Other than that, like, I was entertained by it. I just think the depth and the things that this film gets praised for, and to this day, I think was probably true in the 80s, and it's just not true now. One of the things that a lot of film lovers like me have a problem with is they like to excuse older films for not being out of touch for these times. I know there are movies that I know that are out of touch now that I definitely love. But it is okay for a film to be out of touch. It's also okay to say, because it's out of touch, it doesn't work quite as well as it used to. If it's a snapshot in time, then that's a perfectly good excuse. But there are people and there are aspects of the film that it gets praised for that say it's still relevant to today. And I would say, no, it's not. It really is not. Like, it really is not relevant for today. Except for, like, you know, I think very few nowadays, but some men do act misogynist in the way that the director does in this movie. Women do deal with certain aspects that are in the movie. Right. I don't think as bad, but
it's gotten better. You know,
but I don't think this film is as thoughtful as I think some make it out to be, and I think that was my biggest disappointment, where I was expecting not only a funny comedy, but something very thoughtful and insightful, and I just got something where honestly, I don't get its praise. I don't really understand exactly why it's ascribed this amount of depth and this amount of time talking about its importance, where I look at it and go, it's kind of a dumb comedy. It's just kind of a dumb comedy.
I feel like it was kind of a dumb comedy that they tried to make, like, dramatic, and it just didn't work.
And this is kind of hard with a lot of movies. We just dealt with this, me and Zero, with Dark City, where they blended sci-fi and noir, and the film decided to go heavy on one side and light on the other, and it was to its detriment. And I think this is the same thing with this movie. They took a premise that was very obviously supposed to be a very comedic premise, and somewhere along the way they said, well, we gotta add all this dramatic stuff in there.
Yeah.
I don't think they blended it really well.
No.
It's really hard to do that. Even though it is hard to do that, you have to point out when it's not working. And I don't think the dramatic parts, like you said, worked very well because it's on this shiny veneer. It still wants to be a comedy. It doesn't work. I was entertained. I found parts of it funny. I think the inside baseball of actors and the entertainment industry parts, I think, were probably the highlights for it for me. So I'm going to give it 2.5 stars as well. I think it's fine. Honestly, I think it's kind of forgettable. I'm kind of with you. I don't think I'm going to watch this film again.
No.
But it would be one of those films where someone who loves it, I really want to sit down with them and just explain, what about this film do you love? And
that's
why
the only other time you'd watch it. You're like, I just want a second opinion.
Essentially, yes. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised if we get those types of people who goes, nah, here's why I love this film, and here's why.
And that's fine. Like, we're open to opinions, and we'd love to hear what our listeners think of it.
Right. And there are films from the 90s that I know that me and you adore.
And other people are like, these films suck.
Especially from people who are growing up around these times.
Right.
Who would look at this and go, what are you talking about?
It just hits differently based on when, your childhood, too, and what you've seen in the time. So, understandable.
So if you're growing up and you're an adult at that time, and that's how you identify with, that's fine.
Right.
I just don't think the main crux of the film works. I think it's the comedy aspect. Literally what I'm doing is I am taking the bits and pieces of it that work and say, okay, because I like that stuff, I would recommend it for that alone. But the main premise of the film, I think, just doesn't work. 2.5 stars from me on Tootsie. Disappointed.
Yeah.
Actually, very disappointed.
I was disappointed too.